Good afternoon to you. Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack.com here. It is Tuesday, the 20th of June, 2023. And of course, our big topic today will be Bret and the fact that it'll be heading into the Caribbean. Good news is it's no longer forecast to become a hurricane, but that doesn't mean it won't bring impacts to our friends in the islands. I know a lot of people have cruises planned. They want to visit that area. They have a lot of questions. All the way up into the Bahamas even, people emailing me and tagging me on social media, just kind of curious about it. Not everybody knows as much about tropical activity as me. And yeah, you got questions, so hopefully I can provide some answers for you today. All right, let's take a look at what we've got going on out there. First, National Hurricane Center, this just updated with the 2 p.m. outlook information, mainly for this system here. This is 93L. Pretty good chance that this goes on to develop into a named storm, or at least a depression. That would be unprecedented. You know, we don't like to use that word unless it's completely necessary, but to have Bret and then even a depression, and of course if it became a named storm, Cindy, that's the next one on the list. That's never happened before, where you have two systems out here this early in the season. That's usually something that we would see later in the season, and even August and September, you don't usually see two systems this close to each other forming in the deep tropics. Like I said, even in the peak season, it would be somewhat of a rarity. So looking at our tracking map, this is off the HurricaneTrack Insider site, our interactive map. This is from the 11 a.m. advisory package. Bret moving to the west at a pretty good clip there, 21 miles per hour, embedded in the trade winds out there. It's not a particularly thick tropical storm, and I'll show you that on satellite in just a minute, meaning that it doesn't extend up into the atmosphere a whole lot. Is still kind of disorganized a little bit. Nevertheless, it is a tropical storm. We can clearly see that on satellite imagery. Top winds 40 miles per hour and the pressure 1,008 millibars. Now, where is Bret heading and what can people expect? Well, generally speaking, track forecast has settled. Instead of looking like it might turn off into the North Atlantic like this, that's not going to happen. As you can see, the official forecast has it moving generally just north of due west, right through portions of the Lesser Antilles down here. We can zoom in and kind of get an idea. Not too far to the north of Barbados, so it's pretty far to the south overall, with the potential that the center could cross St. Lucia. That would put these areas to the north in the more dirty side of the storm, if you will. But listen, two things, and this is your reminder already here in June. The cone, that bluish area that we have outlined in a darker blue, the cone of uncertainty, however you want to call it, and the track line right down the middle, those are just different tools to understand the track, the history, where it might be outside of the cone, etc. Like, those are just part of the package. What I really want to focus on, and we're going to really do more of that this year than ever before, with Ian being a real big lesson in following track lines or following cones, is a very simple word: impacts. What's going to happen? That's what people really want to know. When they say, where does it go? Where is it going to go? They're talking about this little dot right here representing the center. That is the it when people say, where is it going to go? What they're not thinking is the bigger picture, that the effects from that little dot extend out much larger, just as an example there. And I'll show you this on satellite. But kind of want to start to re-educate people and refocus their thinking from track lines and cones and geometric features to impacts. All right? And you can see even on this satellite, there's a little blip in there. Probably one of the alien spacecraft moving in front of the satellite. Just joking. Or maybe I'm not. Cue the music of some creepy show, right? But that is the tropical storm, okay? And that's not a dot, right? It's not. And so here are these little islands that it's going to go through. They are much smaller than the tropical storm is. And just wanting to remind you of that. You see the track, you see the cone. That doesn't tell you anything at all about what might happen as it passes your location. And zooming in on it a little bit here, and yes, the little satellite outage, I don't know what it was. It was just a glitch, and it affected the GOES 16, all products. And so you have that one little blank frame there, but that notwithstanding, yes, Bret has a very well-defined circulation, some feeder band activity coming into it, even another one over here on the north side and northeast side. but it is fractured. You understand? You see that? Got this one glob over here of clouds kind of dissipating, not very strong. There's even a little bit of an outflow boundary, it looks like right there. That is air coming down and away from the storm. You need the air to be coming into the storm. So when you see these collapsing thunderstorms, that's not a sign of health. On the east side, though, it is a little bit healthier. And so any boating interest that might happen to be out here, hopefully none. But there could be some big ships, you never know. The deeper convection out here or thunderstorm activity, yes, you could see 40, 50, 60 mile per hour wind, especially in gusts. And then there is the center of circulation right in there, with some thunderstorm activity trying to develop around it. But what Bret doesn't have is solid, well-defined banding, where everything is truly coming together, and you can see that inflow coming in at the surface at all quadrants, and then beautiful outflow at the top. It's a tropical storm, but it's not well on its way to becoming a hurricane. Some of the modeling was kind of aggressive, certainly. The HWRF, which can be very aggressive at times, and even the GFS and the Euro were all suggesting a stronger system than we are seeing now, probably struggling with the anomalous favorable environment versus climatology. And we're going to talk about climatology more in just a moment. But for you folks, going back to the map, in the islands here, that entire mess, all that is going to head your way, and we're going to talk about impacts more tomorrow because we got to see what it looks like. But just expect gusty winds, squally conditions, maybe some thunderstorms with lightning, especially with that dry air around, which I'll show you on a different product in a moment. It's going to be rather nasty. Not a hurricane coming through, not the worst of conditions, but you still need to be aware of it in these areas, especially if you're visiting or you're new. Yeah, you want to pay attention to this, okay? All right, so let's go to the tropical tidbits. I like this page here, this little dashboard. There's the intensity guidance, and most of it, the HWRF is all by itself. We call that an outlier. So just forget it. Don't even worry about the HWRF there. HWRF hurricane weather forecast intensity, something like that. I forget already what it stands for. That doesn't matter because it is an outlier. Most of the model guidance indicating a general downward trend overall. Hurricane weather research forecast. That's what it is. Sorry, HWRF. I had to think about it. But yeah, most of the guidance for intensity, not very aggressive at all, and that is certainly good news. Track modeling here, generally speaking, now this is very tightly clustered. Again, discount the HWRF there, off on its own. Overall, the envelope is very consistent. Got a big old ridge sitting out here, going to track off to the west through the Caribbean, and it'll more than likely perish or come to its end, if you will, in this region of the Caribbean, and I'll explain more about why that'll happen as we progress. All right, so let's look at it on the GFS. First of all, the GFS was pretty aggressive. The HWRF was aggressive. That's run off of GFS background fields. Even the European, the ECMWF, was showing more of a robust system from time to time. The models were struggling with this because, again, it's very unusual to see this time of year. So what does the latest GFS show? Just as an example, there's a lot of models. We don't want to be here for a half hour or more, so let's just show you one for now. There's the system down at the lower part of the atmosphere, 5,000 feet or 850 millibars. And there's 93L, that other system, okay? And then there's more energy sitting over Africa. So let's see what happens. Again, I like to look at this part of the atmosphere, or at least in the modeling, to see what the bottom of it looks like, the framework, the skeleton. And if it looks impressive, generally everything else is too. Now, it doesn't look that impressive, but it's not nothing, if that makes any sense at all. It's not a non-event. It's going to move through the islands there with some impacts, as you can clearly see. In fact, let's just change the map extent here, the region, and zoom in a little bit there. There it is. That's out at about, we'll call it 3 days out, roughly, as it passes through the islands. And let's just go back and forth a little bit here, and that'll help to understand the evolution of it. Wobbles along there are fairly decent low-level structure, if you will, but not too strong wind-wise. Heavy rain, gusty winds from time to time, especially in any bands that form. Yes, that's going to pass through the islands there, probably north of Barbados, but you never know. Any southward track change, and it could impact Barbados directly. And we'll see. So right through the central part of the Lesser Antilles into the Caribbean, and then you can see what would become possibly Cindy there. Also small, and this is fairly small too, the aerial coverage. I probably should have mentioned that. These are pretty small this time of year. They get larger later because the energy pockets that come off of Africa, the easterly waves, those get much larger later in the year. So these small systems are prone to rapid increases and rapid decreases in organization and intensity because they're very fickle and fragile early in the season like this. That's another one of the challenges because it's just June. Nevertheless, these track into the Caribbean or close to the Caribbean anyway. Cindy, to be or whatever it would be, moves away, so that's good. And then they just kind of die off. You see, it's just not much is going to happen, it looks like. Yet, it is still pretty unusual to see. Now, one of the reasons we're not seeing much development, making sure my blue will work with this, there's the moisture. This is the humidity in the mid-levels of the atmosphere. 700 millibars to 300 millibars of the atmosphere. That's just a layer of the atmosphere. The greens in here, that's all deep, rich humidity, if you will. High humidity for these things to take advantage of. The brown, not so much. So watch what happens if we look at the same animation, if you will, and move this out into time. There's all those different pockets of energy. Pretty impressive. You got to admit, this is about 90 hours. Just move it to 4 days out. There is the leftovers of, let's see, let me go back, make sure I got all this right. Sorry. I want to make sure. Okay, so there goes Bret into the islands at hour 60. I was just kind of interested in this little feature, a little tropical wave there. There's Bret, there's 93, there's another one. So it's an active pattern, but, and this was my point, I kind of messed up by getting distracted by that guy. All this brown in here, that's still some relatively dry air. Yes, the Saharan air layer is out there. There's just not a lot of dust with it. See, you don't need the dust to have a negative impact on tropical cyclone development. The dry air in the mid-levels is a huge impediment to tropical cyclones. And here's a great experiment that you can try to prove this. You get a steamed up mirror in your bathroom. You get the warm hair dryer turned on. You put it on and all that moisture goes away. It starts in a little circle and it spreads out. Or you just open the door to the bathroom and the cooler, drier air comes in. That's called advection. It moves in, it pushes up against that mirror, and within a few minutes your moisture-laden mirror, all that moisture on there from the shower goes away, right? Same kind of thing down here in the tropics. The dry air makes that moisture scant, right? It's just not very available, and these systems can't do much because you've got to have a lot of moisture available, and this just isn't going to cut it because it's June. We can't forget it's June. This is a great tool right here. I want to show you this. The SHIPS diagnostic tool, statistical hurricane intensity prediction scheme, a very simple way at looking at the intensity prediction, one of the models anyway, or one of the tools. And let's look right over here to the 700 to 500 millibar relative humidity. Pretty decent. It's not the best, but 50-something%, yeah, that's not going to do it. Trying to draw across here. Those numbers are not very impressive. So fairly, I think I can do better if I just highlight like that. There we go. That works. Well, it did. Yeah, 50s are not going to cut it. You need much higher values than that. The wind shear, not too bad. That's right in here. And then it does start to increase by 48 hours to 15 knots and higher. And then this system probably should open up into a wave of low pressure once again and more or less dissipate. And a big reason why is this word right here, climatology. It is June 20th, not August 20th. If we were seeing these two systems on August 20th, 93L and Bret, struggling, if you will, not doing much in the modeling, then we could point to potentially El Nino. Oh, maybe El Nino is doing its dirty work, if you will, or flip it around. Dirty work against the storms. Great for us who don't want to have to deal with them, but doing its thing, if you will, keeping these systems at bay. If it was August 20th, yeah, we might say, yeah, something's kind of funky out there. But being June 20th, this is exactly what you would expect to happen, and that is not much. So that these are not intensifying yet, and presumably won't, really isn't a surprise. And it goes to show, too, that's why this map here, put together by one of our crowdfunding supporters, these are your development areas. I showed this the other day. In the entire month of June, almost everything is way over here for a reason. All right, now Bret started out here, a little bit more to the east of Bret from 2017, and then 93L is sitting out here even farther to the east. Yeah, but still, June is not very busy out across this area for a reason. It's that word climatology. The whole atmosphere ocean situation has to become what we call conditionally favorable, where all the different ingredients are in place. There are a few, and for a brief window of time, it looks like we had some development, but that's probably going to be the extent of it. A pretty solid sign, though, that we could have a pretty busy season ahead once we do catch up where climatology would start to do its thing. And I mention that because, again, the water temperatures out here, ridiculously warmer than average. There's your El Nino trying to counter all of this. And it'll just be, a case of, well, let's wait and see. Once we get to August and everything else lines up climatologically speaking, then we will see what happens. But boy, that warm water anomaly, this continues to be really something to look at, that's for sure. And real quick, just looking at the wind pattern, this is called a Hofmoeller diagram. What are we looking at? Well, generally speaking, your blues are easterly winds, and fairly strong at that, across the area between 5 south of the equator and 5 north of the equator. So right along the equatorial region, and these different wind plots show you anomalies. And if it's white, it's generally right where it should be. Blue means stronger easterlies, red means stronger westerlies at 5,000 feet. That's what that 850 millibars means right there. This is where we are now. This is the future. This is the past. Longitudinally, 60 degrees west, we've had very light trades to even some westerlies that you've seen, and that's helped to really warm the Atlantic across the INSO regions of the Pacific here. We've had a pretty good bout of easterlies and a few westerly winds in here. More easterlies coming, some more westerlies. So there's this weird sort of punch and counterpunch between trying to get to full-on El Nino and strengthen it, and then you've got these easterlies that come in, those blues that counter that. Strong easterly winds don't allow the El Nino to, this is down at the equator, or close to the equator, north and south of it, doesn't allow the El Nino to come on. So it's just interesting to see this battle continuing. We don't have a full thrust into a moderate to strong El Nino just yet. So that, and then going back to this, I mean, this should just keep on getting amplified. This will gradually come on, maybe even stall a little bit. We'll have to see. Really setting the stage for a very interesting time, 60 days plus from now. We might have some activity between now and then. We shall see. But Bret and 93L, that'll have our interest for now. All right. Several of you have purchased these as of late. I've shipped them out. Appreciate the feedback I've gotten from you on Twitter about it as well. If you want one, it's a paper map. It's big. It's a nice poster size, like 20 by 28 inches. I mean, I should have one with me, but I'm kind of on vacation, working at the same time. But if you want to get one, I'll put the link in the description of today's video. A paper map. You know, they still make those. I do. I drew that myself many years ago in Adobe Illustrator, so it's a little bit of a work of art. And you can track whatever happens the rest of the season. I don't send it on an easel, though. This is just for display purposes. I'll fold it up, put it in an envelope, and you can unfold it, get your Sharpie, and you're good to go. I had a bunch of tubes, but we've already sold out of the tubes, so to speak. And the tubes are just, it costs like $8 to mail those. It's ridiculous. Story for another day. But if you want one of the posters, the hurricane tracking maps, I'll be glad to send you one. Check out the link, like I said, in today's description of the video. All right, so we'll keep an eye on Bret. Maybe you're tracking Bret on your paper tracking map. Headed for the Caribbean, but like I said, yes, there will be impacts. I just don't think it's going to be a real big problem. And we'll hone in on what those impacts will be over the next couple of days. All right? All right. As always, thank you for tuning in and giving me a part of your day. I do appreciate it. Good to have you along. I am Mark Sudduth, Hurricane Track. I'll talk to you again tomorrow.